So, hello everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the session of Impacting Environments, a Youth-Led Approach. And we have an amazing speaker. Her name is Lynne Goodwin. She is the administrator for the California Friday Night Live Partnership. And I'll let you take it away in just a moment. If you notice my name begins with staff on the participant list, I'll be here during the entire session in case you have any technology issues or questions. If you need assistance or have questions for the presenter, please type them in the chat box anytime. We'll be doing Q&A for us, and so I'll be recording questions as we go along and holding until that time at the end where she'll be answering questions. So without further ado, Lynne, please.
Thanks, Steph. It's a pleasure to be here today. And thanks for saying administrator while it was written and not acknowledging the typo there. You're a nice guy. So let's get started today. We are here to talk about environmental prevention. And we are going to define the differences between individual prevention and environmental prevention. Some of you may know that, some of you may need a refresher, and sometimes it's just nice to have that base to talk about. We're going to examine some of the environmental factors that influence youth decisions, and we are going to discuss strategies for engaging youth in the implementation of environmental prevention practices. We are also in part 2 going to spend a little bit of time practicing this ourselves, so that'll be fun. So why focus on the environments? What is it about the environment that why would we want to promote environmental change as opposed to individual change? Well, there's a number of reasons. The magnitude of the problem. Most of us face prevention problems where the scope and the depth and the breadth is huge. So scaling our projects and our efforts makes sense. Doing things that can impact the largest number of people is the best bang for our buck and the best use of our time. There's always a turnover in our risk groups. They're always changing and evolving. So if we're always just targeting the individuals in those risk groups, we are always going to be moving them through. So looking at the sustainability of the work is why you would want to really look at your environment as opposed to individuals. I am not here to say that individual prevention or individual interventions aren't good or aren't worthy. It's just not what we're talking about today. They have a place for sure. But ATOD and gambling use can be influenced by environments, and why not change those environments in a way that's sustainable and that can have positive influences, or at least not have negative influences over time, as opposed to just that one risk turnover group. So think about this fish in the fishbowl. Can somebody drop it in the chat and give me a name? Whoops, we're gonna go backwards. What's the name for our fish? Let's see, can you help me out there, Steph? Let's see, Charlie, first one popped up. Fish's name is Charlie, thank you for that. All right, anybody ever had a goldfish when they were a little kid? I have a lot of goldfish that are currently living on farms, other places, so my parents said. But what's the thing about goldfish? They live in these environments, right? Does the fishbowl always look like this? Anybody drop it in the chat. What is it that fish do in their everyday lives? What do? They poop. That's right. That's right. They grow to the size of the bowl. They swim. They swim in circles. They eat. Goldfish eat and eat and eat. Several of my fish went to live on farms because they ate and ate and ate because I fed and fed and fed them. So and when they eat, they poop, right? So what happens when they poop? What happens to their water? The water gets murky, clouds, dirty. Just it's gross, right? It gets contaminated. And so all of a sudden Charlie is living not in this pristine environment, but he is living in this dirty environment. Right? He's living in this really yucky, and that affects his ability to breathe in the way that he does. His ability to thrive is compromised by this yucky environment. So what can we do? Would we point our finger at Charlie and say, don't poop anymore, or stop eating that food that makes you poop? Or would we say, clean up your water? Or would we say, don't breathe? Don't try to breathe in that water? What would we tell Charlie in an effort to make his life good? Sorry, I have to look over here. Change the water and feed him less. We can change Charlie's water and get him a filter. We will provide help for you, Charlie. Francis, you're a good person. And change the water. Absolutely. Because this is what it's like for a young person in some of the environments that they're living in. Would we point our finger and say, don't look, don't participate, don't absorb it, don't think about it? No, we would not ever consider doing that, but we do it every day. Like in a really logical way, and if we were thinking about it in a really mindful way, we would never think that this is the way young people should attempt to thrive. And yet we do it every day in our communities by the ads that they see, the behaviors that they see, the way that people think, the way things are promoted, and the way people behave. So that's really what is impressing them on the day-to-day from a very young age. We know from the tobacco research and the tobacco settlements back in the 80s and 90s that young people's impressions, that's why Joe Camel was outlawed, right? Because Joe Camel was something that was out in the environment that young people could identify. And in fact, at the time of those settlements, surveys show that more 5-year-olds could identify Joe Camel than Mickey Mouse. There's something wrong with that, right? But it's intentional. And when folks look to sell a product or to, especially something that's profitable, they look to saturate environments in different ways. So what's the difference between individual prevention and environmental prevention? It's kind of simple, and yet sometimes it's hard to process. It's hard to think about it. Using the public health triangle can be one way to do that. Individual, if you put the individual at the top of this triangle, that's the person, the young person, the individual. It can be the adult. But if you look at the base of the triangle, that's where we look at the environment, that larger space where the individual resides, whether they work, that it's their community, right? For some young people, it can be their school has a huge influence, and you could call that their environment. The other thing, the agent. Anybody have any thoughts about what that could be? If we're talking about prevention, it could be prevention of anything. What could the agent be? What are some examples? I'm going to look at the chat, so I'm not looking at, that's why you have to look at the top of my head. What are some examples of what the agent could be if we're talking about prevention? So I'll give you a hint. If we're talking about underage drinking, the agent would be the alcohol itself. So what about some other issues? Vaping, okay, the vapes itself, right? The tobacco. So gaming, it would be the lottery tickets, right? It would be the the different way, the actual gaming products, right? Right now, it's loot boxes, right? Or online video gaming, those kinds of things. Bright primary colors on gaming and scratchers. So it's the thing itself. And so how it's produced, how it's packaged, how it's promoted has a huge influence on our environments for sure. And so the agent, changing the agent and how it's sold, promoted, and packaged can influence the environment as well. So in environmental prevention, we're focusing more on changing the agent and the environment, where individual prevention focuses on changing the host, okay? So ways that we focus on changing the individual is by things like education, if, like with alcohol, it might be, or in drugs, it might be dare sessions where a police officer comes in and talks about all the bad things that are going to happen. It looks to influence the individual's decision making. And again, curriculum is often individually targeted. Rarely is it an environmental strategy. And so it seeks to change the individual's mind. And again, not a bad thing. It's just not what we're talking about today. So again, to help define the difference between individual prevention and environmental prevention, the goal of individual prevention is to change the attitudes and the behaviors, right? Not a bad thing at all. It happens through education, health promotion, life skills, things like that. And folks that usually implement it, professionals, peers, staff, or teachers. Folks in an authoritarian, it's usually prevention that we do to people. That might be the easiest way to think about it. It's prevention that we do to people. Where in environmental prevention, the goal is to change the agent and the environment. That's basic, right? We do it through policies, enforcement, organizing, coalition building, media. We don't do it to people, but we do it through engaging the community, the environment. And coalitions do it, community does it, youth, those impacted by the problem. So there's space for everybody. So let's go a little bit deeper in understanding environmental prevention with another analogy. Who wants to name the dog? All right, Spot. Roxanne, name the dog Spot. Thanks, Roxanne. You're on it. I'm just going to move this right here and see if that helps me. Thank you for bearing with me. That way you don't have to see the top of my head quite so much. All right. So we've named the dog Spot. Spot lives in this doghouse, and he looks fairly happy, except Spot has fleas. Spot has fleas so bad. He's had infections, repeated infections, because he scratches. They give him a bath. It doesn't work. They've taken him to the vet. When he gets these infections and they treat the infections, he's even gotten a disease one time, like a blood-borne disease, because he scratched so much. And they treated that blood-borne disease. But Spot is a beloved dog, but he's miserable in his doghouse. How can we help Spot? What can we do? How can we change Spot's life by changing his environment? We're doing a lot of individual things by taking him to the vet, treating the infection, treating the blood issues. We give him a bath. So give him activities to flea prevention, spray for the fleas, move him inside. He needs a walk to go to the dog park, get rid of the fleas in the area. Change his environment. There you go. Those are awesome suggestions. And at the end of the day, we can take him out. We could take him to the groomer every day, but we bring him back to that doghouse. We can't say, Spot, don't let the fleas jump on you. Spot, don't get it scratch once the fleas bite you. That doesn't work, right? So we have to change Spot's environment for him. We need to remove those fleas in a way that's permanent. And so that means maybe getting him out of the doghouse and spraying not just the doghouse, but the environment around him. Maybe it's even having some rules about what kind of dogs or policies about other dogs coming in contact with the yard, right? That might be carrying fleas in. There can be all kinds of things like that and that gives us a more permanent change, right? As opposed to taking him to the vet every day to put the Band-Aid on the problem. So good feedback. So essentially, environmental prevention is the promotion of health and safety by changing the policies, the settings, and the community conditions. That's key, community conditions that contribute to high risk unhealthy behaviors, period. It works to change the messages and the settings that directly and indirectly make things appealing. So remembering that term appealing, because that is part of this process. So some of the things that are not necessarily appealing or enforced over time may not be our primary targets. So educators, you have still got some really good feedback about the dog. That's awesome. I got some dog lovers out there. I have to say, I did this presentation one time in Kansas, and for the first time ever, they said, well, you should take the dog out back and shoot it. It was horrifying. But that was somebody's answer. Everybody has a different perspective. So let's talk about norms, media messages, laws, and accessibility. These are the 4 planks, the 4 principles of environmental prevention. If you want to change the environment, these are the avenues that you need to take, okay? So norms, they address what's considered acceptable in communities, right? Super basic. But when we think about what's normal in communities, sometimes if we think about it in that really deliberate way, and you're going to have an opportunity to do that, we are surprised because it's become so normalized in our community that it doesn't even occur to us that it maybe isn't the best thing for our community. Any of you have schools that tailgate, before football games, things like champagne glasses for the prom souvenir. I was did a training in West Virginia where the school gave out flasks for the prom souvenir. Different things like that. I'll show you some other examples that are going to horrify you, specific to gambling. But we don't even think about it. Many of our community events are sponsored by industries like tobacco and especially alcohol. And so we see their logos all over our community and family events through the banners. And they're not really concerned about the good of our community, but they do want to make sure that they get their brand out there in a regular, consistent way that everyone is exposed to it. Because when people are exposed to it, they become comfortable with it, right? How many of you have little ones in your life, and they can't read, but they know what the McDonald's sign is, right? They know through that kind of exposure. And those are the first steps. That was the whole target with Joe Camel and having this cartoon camel. It indoctrinated young people to the idea of tobacco at a very young age. It made it comfortable with it as young as 4 and 5. And that's where a lot of our normalizing comes in at that age. So what's considered acceptable in families, right? So what's considered acceptable in your family may not be considered acceptable in another family, but that is where people get their ideas of what is normal, right? So things as basic as, in my house, nobody ate dinner until everybody was at the table. That's where dinner was eaten. After nothing good ever happened after 11 o'clock, right? Those were the things that were normal in our house. Norms are the unwritten behavior in any given setting. Can you pop into the chat some things that you have seen that are normalized in your community, and with just after a moment's thought, any example? Sunday card games after dinner, that's a great one. Frat rituals in some colleges, absolutely. Your high school accepted prizes bought by Camel for raffles, absolutely. Gang involvement, absolutely. These are great examples of things that are normalized and that sometimes we don't even bother to question. Is it the right thing? Is it best for us? High school casino nights. Oh my God, I haven't heard that one about 11 o'clock in years. Yeah, my parents were strict. Okay, letting kids on sports teams buy or sell raffle tickets. Absolutely. So media messages. Those are very central to shaping our attitudes, norms, and beliefs about acceptable and unacceptable behaviors. So we get those messages everywhere, right? And some of them are obvious to us and some of them are not. I mean, have you ever heard a country song that doesn't refer to drinking or beer? There are so many different places. Now with social media platforms being versatile and targeted to different age groups and different, even different interest groups. You know, Facebook can target really specific interests. But they help to shape our attitudes about what is normal and what is acceptable. We're going to show you some more media messages. So images in entertainment and news media glamorize gambling behaviors, especially among youth, and they tend to solely blame the individual users for their problems. We don't see communities taking ownership for the problems that individuals are having. And we need to look in that direction and stay away from blame and focus on changing the spaces that encourages this in the first place. So laws, rules, and policies and their enforcement. Policies without enforcement are worthless. So policies are determined and enforced by both families, law enforcement, schools, businesses, local, state, and national policymakers. So policies can look different in different communities and at different levels. If community coalitions are looking to start getting involved in policies to change the environment, I really recommend the low-hanging fruit policies, like even the schools. Getting schools to have policies against anything that utilizes gambling mechanisms can be a great start. Because not only do you have that policy that is going to start to change the normalizing of that behavior at the school over time, you're starting conversations about the problem in the first place. You know, policies don't happen just in a vacuum. You have conversations about why these policies can positively impact our communities. And having those conversations in and of itself can raise awareness around the issues. So, I mean, a lot of you I know are clinicians. So how fair is it for people that have gambling issues to have to go to support their child at the casino night, their kid on the football team, because that's what all the other parents are doing? There's a lot of these behaviors that can be triggers for folks, and yet we're normalizing it. So, those laws, rules, and policies shape the way gambling products are sold, promoted, and consumed. One of the things we know, I hope there's nobody on here from California. One of the things that we recently learned from the Gambling Commission in California, we asked how it was, how they were enforcing enforcing the legal age of lottery product sales. So scratchers, lottery tickets, were they doing compliance checks? How is that being monitored? Because policies without enforcement aren't always very helpful. So the answer was, well, everybody's on their honor. So if young people are accessing through retail merchants, one thing is, I mean, when you were growing up, did you know where did young people know where the stores they could buy beer? You knew what was a sure thing, right? That's the same thing with other products, such as tobacco and gambling instruments. Young people know where they can access them. So access is a huge issue. So how easy is it to get it? Where is it sold? What's the cost? Who's making it available? These are things that we can examine in our environments that start to shift environments. Whoops. What's something that you notice about these 4 planks of environmental prevention? That's a good comment. I always think of the lotto scratch-offs as holiday gifts. Absolutely. Oh wow, a raffle ticket. You guys have some great chat stuff. I could do all day with this chat. So what are some things though that you're seeing? I'll give you a hint. These planks are all interconnected. right? There's an interconnection. So for example, these laws, if we're enforcing laws about the legal age of sales, and we're monitoring whether retail outlets are carting and selling to the right community or the right age group, it's going to start to change the norms over time. When those stores know that they're going to be held accountable, their selling behavior is going to change, right? It's going to reduce the accessibility. These are all interwoven. And the other thing is, you can't do all of these at once. But so you have to identify what your biggest problem is. Is the problem that young people are have easy access and there is no monitored compliance in your community? Or is it that young people are inundated with norms in the community that promote gambling? I definitely, in working across the country, have seen that different communities have different ideas about what is normal, and it's very interesting in the differences. So evaluating what's normal and taking that hard look through a different lens is, what are we saying is normal in this community? Some of those things like the 50-50 raffles, those are institutions in schools, right? People walking up and down the bleachers. And folks have never thought about it. Like, is this something that we should be doing in this environment? I think I just got lost. Okay. All right. Moving on. So this is a great example of norms. This I found on Pinterest on a page for teachers and educators for activities. It blew up on Pinterest. This was a teacher teaching, did a lesson with kids on how to make scratchers in the classroom. They used this puffy paint and they wrote things on there, and some of them were like, unload the dishwasher, don't have to unload the dishwasher for a month. They created lottery tickets, they created scratchers, and then they brought them home to their families. This person didn't have any idea, right, of what she was messing around with. But this is real. I mean, you can definitely look at it on Pinterest. And it's a great example of how sometimes people inadvertently normalize things as well. Right, that's a big OMG. And it definitely goes along the lines of normalizing. So when 5 and 10-year-olds are doing this as an activity in the after school program, we're starting to formulate young people's ideas. I believe it was in an after school program, so not necessarily a subject, but after school programs are always looking for activities. Bingo happens in our schools all the time, in the classes on holidays, and also we do Boo Bingo every Halloween with prizes and such. It's always been a thing in our community that the cheerleaders sell raffle tickets for the football team. There's all kinds of those kinds of things. Okay. So, and you were just talking about bingo in the chat. And yes, this is a great way to teach young people numbers. Absolutely. I mean, that's something that I did as an educator. We used bingo to learn about numbers, but often it evolves into winners and losers, right? You get all the right numbers, you keep track of them, then there's got to be a prize. So media messages, those are very central to shaping our attitudes, and lots of times they occur sort of subconsciously. I mean, how many of you've got the radio on, you've got the TV on in the background, there's a quick Instagram ad. Who even knows what young people see in their Snapchat accounts? There's all these different platforms where things come at us really quickly as well. And again, things like that, banners that have sponsorship of casinos or different institutions like that. They're often place images in the entertainment industry. News media glamorizes gambling behaviors, especially among youth, and they tend to solely blame young people. We just talked about that. So here's some examples of, these are some posts from some influencers recently. These are the Pac-Man scratchers have just really been a thing here, tapping into that 90s generation. But these are influencers. If you go and look at their followers, they're young. They are young followers, and you know, again, they have hundreds of thousands of followers. What are some other things that they are portraying? What else do you see? So besides the scratchers, they're young and attractive. Their clothing, they're diverse. They're happy. They're happy, absolutely. They look like fun people, and they're probably popular. Absolutely, absolutely. They look cool, right? Yeah, good-looking people play lotto and have fun. Those are great observations. This is another one in California. So there's actors on roller skates. Anybody have any 80s or 90s flashbacks here from time in the roller rink and Pac-Man? And this one rotates around get your quarters ready, meaning to scratch off the new Pac-Man scratchers. So lots of times media messages also tap into feelings, right, or emotions. And so that they can get a quick hit, right? For some people, they'll remember this as a time that was fun, that was positive, that they got to be, that they were a different person maybe, right? Didn't have responsibility. And so they tap into those emotions and are connecting that product to a positive emotion. You use these Pac-Man scratchers, you can feel the way you did when you were 17. Or, well, clearly not 17, but that kind of thing. It's relatable. Yes, Valerie, spot on. Valley girl, I like it. So other thoughts about that? They look so cool. But definitely, they're good looking and fashionable as cigarette actors were back in the day. The same with film stars smoking in movies, typically glamorous back in the day. Now movie smokers are villains, low-income losers, and down and out. They are out of fashion. Gambling is still in fashion. That's a great observation, Susan. Thank you. It is, but again, what normalizes the media messages that start to normalize things are things that can get to our emotions quickly. So this is another one. So this is a lottery. I want to say this is West Virginia's. This is one of their ads. Are any of you that don't have kids in your life rushing out to see the Addams Family movie? Like, who's this targeting? Who is this targeting? Nostalgia? That's true. That's true. But also kids. I mean, could you see parents buying this for kids as a Halloween gift? Like for trick in lieu of candy? Not handing them out in the neighborhood, but for their own kids as a fun Halloween treat. Easy, right? Yeah. So anybody remember Willy Wonka? Absolutely. Favorite. So again, tapping into that emotion. Did anybody that read that when they were a little kid remember how they felt about that golden ticket? I mean, going through that story, and that golden ticket was everything, right? It was just the most amazing story. And in 10 seconds, that image, you tap right into that emotion, right? So yeah, $10. That's a lot, huh, Ruth? Okay. How are we doing for time? So laws. I talked a little bit about California not having an enforcement mechanism. Policies without enforcement mechanisms are really useless. They're words on a page, they're an opportunity for a brief conversation, but other than that, policies without any intention of enforcement are useless. So, coalitions, you need to make sure that everybody's involved in these processes so that these policies that you pass have legs, like that they have some grit, because enforcement is always also driven by the will of the community. And if you can create community will for enforcement, your policies will be enforced. So they're determined and enforced by families, law enforcement, schools, businesses, local, state, and national policymakers. And they shape, again, the way products are sold, promoted, and consumed. Can any of you think of policies that have been either in your workplace or your school growing up or your family, and it was a rule, it was a policy, but it was never enforced? Everybody knew about it, but everybody also knew that it was not going to be enforced. Can anybody think of anything like that? No sex until marriage. Okay, Denise went in hard right from the beginning. Yay, Denise. True though, absolutely. What else? PDA, public displays of affection. Can be things like, at schools, like dress code. Like, yeah, we have a dress code, but we don't have a dress code. No cell phones in classes. Yeah, you can't have a cell phone, but my teacher just told me to text my mom. Code of conduct. Absolutely. Currently having to stay 6 feet from people. When rules aren't enforced, it kind of does the opposite thing. It devalues it, right? It sends a sub message of, this isn't really important. So when with drinking, parents who allow 17-year-olds to drink in their home, what message are they sending to 17-year-olds? This rule isn't important. You don't have to follow it. You don't have to be 21 to drink. And there's that almost pressure, right? Oops. Zero tolerance bullying. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Okay. So accessibility. How easy is it to obtain the product? Where is it sold? What is the cost? Who is making it available? And we've just had a lot of discussion about that. And again, reiterating that fact of it's all interconnected. Who's making it available? Accessibility. Lots of parents think, they're hosting the poker nights, right, at their house. There's a lot of different ways that young people are participating. Whoops. Okay. Whoops. So we're going to go back. Did we decide that we could go into groups?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so we are going to go into a breakout, and you're going to go in groups of 5, and you're going to have a discussion about the different ways that you see gambling promoted in your community. Okay, different ways that you see gambling promoted in your community through media messages, and then we're going to I'll go ahead and talk about accessibility in the same conversation. So how is it promoted, media messages, and talk about accessibility. What are you seeing happening specifically in your community? And we're going to take about 4 minutes to have that discussion in groups of 5. Do your peers a solid and turn on your camera and dive in for just a few minutes and help folks think about what it looks like in your community.
It's happening quite slowly. Oh, maybe people are jumping back with their last 60 seconds before it goes out.
Yeah. Whoops, I keep doing this. All right, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for those conversations. I got to have a great conversation with Patricia in my group. Gambling ads during hockey games. So as you're coming back, go ahead and pop into the chat any aha moments that you heard from somebody else, just anything that stood out to you in your group. Or if you want to go off mute and say something.
I wasn't able to hear the person that was in my group, and he wasn't able to hear me either. So I just don't know what happened when I went into the breakout. I was in a breakout with Ken, and we couldn't even communicate. And I tried going on the chat for the Zoom aid, and I already checked the speaker. It was working on the computer, but I'm using a phone to dial in because.
And I'm sorry about that. I don't think that the phone works for breakouts. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay, I guess we're back. Hello.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Welcome back, everybody. So if anybody wants to come off mute, I know that that's a risky thing with 200 people, but I'm a gamer here. Harry, what do you want to tell us about your group?
Oh, our group was, thank you, Lynn. Our group was fantastic. We were talking about how different ways that gambling is promoted in the different neighborhoods, in New York City. And a lot of it centers around, raffles and then lottery tickets and people shooting dice. Because, to have a dice game, all you need is a pair of dice on a wall, and people gamble for weed and they gamble for lottery tickets.
Yeah. That's
so
true.
You got everything going on at the same time,
That's an interesting observation. Thank you, Harry. Patricia, what did you want to tell us?
I was just, I thought to myself, for all the auctions that I've been to that have baskets of different food groups or tickets for a spa or wine, the basket that seems to get the most tickets is the basket that's filled with scratch-offs and lotto tickets, because everybody, again, wants to win that one in the hopes that they're going to win that much more,
That's a great observation.
And I think that the other piece is that a lot of our raffles and are all about charity or not for profit. So like the fire department does an awful lot of fundraising through that way,
Yeah.
And again, makes it a norm, and it's good. It's good to, do that.
Absolutely.
So,
Lynne?
There's some great, yes.
I was going to say, I'm going to jump in because I want to make sure I give you an opportunity to take a break. 2 hours is pretty long. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, perfect.
Can we let Paul and Vitaly just go really quickly?
Yes,
I
absolutely.
just want to honor those hands.
Okay, I guess we have to go quickly then. So I noticed in my neighborhood, I can see it on the walls, on the stores, it's promoted. But I think the biggest thing is that it's promoted through the entertainment that surrounds my area as well. And I think it's probably a much more insidious thing than just your basic environmental things that we keep talking about. We have it's a much bigger industry to really start, talking to. But, and $1 a dream, in my area, I got I live in a poor area. So $1 in a dream means a whole lot. Because a lot of us have at least $1 and we have a dream. And so we can make tons of money.
But that's a horrible message. Vitaly, quickly?
Yeah. Oh, like we were talking in my group about the billboards, how they got it next to the highways right now. We can see them from miles away. And also another thing we spoke about is the lottery machines in the stores now, where you can just buy the lotto tickets when you walk in to get a cup of coffee, and the lotto machine is right in front of you.
Yes, and sometimes like the placement of those lotto machines get like right next to the door makes it much harder to monitor the ages and the who. You have been so fun. I am excited to be with you for the second hour. We'll look at some of the chats when we come back, but thanks for letting me run to the restroom.
Thank you for being here. This has been phenomenal.
Thank
I'm
you.
very excited to let everyone know that you will be back for the next session, which is making the environmental connection, which I'm sure will be just as great. But I do want to make sure you get a little break between sessions. So at this point, thanks everyone for coming. I'm going to end this for now, and we'll open up the next session shortly.